Now, we would come to the business panel discussion titled G2B, B2G roles and responsibilities to support the green transition. And may I introduce the panelists. We would have Mr. Alan Canny, Eurocham Advisory Board Chairman. He would be the moderator of this panel discussion. Mrs. Caroline Turk, Country Director, Vietnam of World Bank. Mr. Stuart Livesey, CEO, Copenhagen Offshore Partners, Vietnam. Mrs. Sunita Luhu, Head of EIB Group for Southeast Asia and the Pacific European Investment Bank. Mr. Olivier Rousselet, CEO, BNP Paribas, Vietnam. And Mrs. Nguyễn Thị Mai Thanh, Chairwoman, RE Corporation. So all of the panelists, please come on stage for the panel discussion.
Welcome everyone to Eurocham Green Economy Forum 2023. As you all know, we are here in Hanoi today to discuss the evolving role of the green economy in our world. For this, please allow me to begin this panel discussion by quickly reviewing the important points from this morning's discussions. On the topic of clean energy, as of 2022, Vietnam renewable energy sources contributed to over 25% of our electricity generation. This growth was fueled by the government's feed-in tariff policy, which attracted significant local and foreign investment in renewable energy projects. However, there is a notable presence of fossil fuels in our energy mix. To further our green ambition, it is essential to expand Vietnam's renewable energy capabilities, modernize the grid, and consider the introduction of carbon pricing mechanism. Turning to the decarbonization of cities, both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City have made impressive progress in enhancing public transportation and adopting sustainable urban planning practices. Vietnam City should continue to focus on sustainable urban development, improve waste management, transform waste to energy, increase public transportation access, and lend support to electric vehicle initiatives. Discussing manufacturing and trade, Vietnam has established itself as a prominent manufacturing hub, especially in sectors like electronic, garment, and textiles. But this growth, while economically beneficial, has brought with it certain environmental challenges. We must promote more eco-friendly manufacturing processes, provide incentives for industries to reduce emissions, and capitalize on our international agreements to foster green supply chains. On sustainable finance, the Vietnam Green Growth Strategy introduced in 2019 underlined the importance of sustainable finance in our economic landscape. As we move forward, it's crucial to create a standard for recognizing sustainable economic activities. Financial institutions should be encouraged to offer green financial products. Furthermore, we should channel more funding towards sustainable projects and ensure a significant proportion of loans-backed green initiatives. Lastly, when we think of agriculture, this sector, which is one of Vietnam's most important, is under threat from the adverse effect of climate change. It becomes absolutely necessary to support research that leads to more resilient agricultural practices. We should aim to reduce water consumption in our farms, champion sustainable land management, and set ambitious targets like achieving zero net deforestation in farming region by 2030. In conclusion, While Vietnam has made substantial progress in this area, our journey toward a greener future continues. Through international collaboration, the implementation of strong policy, and making data-driven decisions, we can solidify our commitments in clean energy. Sustainable urban development, green finance, and resilient agriculture, paving the way for a prosperous and sustainable future for all our citizens. Thank you for your attention. Now, let's move on to the panel discussion of our program. Thank you, panelists, to be here. I think none of you need any introduction, so I will go straight to the discussion as we are also behind schedule. Let's start with you, Caroline, representing the World Bank. The decarbonization of the economy requires a rapid acceleration of investment, as we discussed earlier. As a strong financier, especially on the energy sector, for the past 25 years, how you assess the investment needs of Vietnam for its energy transition?
Thank you very much, Alain. Yes, indeed, the World Bank has been a strong partner to the government of Vietnam in financing public investments in the energy sector over the last 25 years. When we look forwards, we see the numbers in PDP-8. So just in the period from now up to 2030, PDP-8 is based on an estimate of growth in energy demand of 9% per annum, which is driven by growth and driven by the need to have an energy transition. And so that translates into necessary investments of about 135 billion over that time frame. Of that 135 billion, about, let's say, 20 to 30 billion are in public investments. And the former speaker, Madam Bích Ngọc, was exactly correct when she said you need to use your public investment in a way that leverages the private investment. As Vietnam goes forwards into this challenge of the energy transition, public investment will actually be the smaller part of it. Private investment will carry most of the weight. But that private investment will not come if the public investment is not done. Investors in wind power and solar power generation are not going to come if there's no transmission system to evacuate their power from their power plants into the grids where they can actually sell money. So while the public investment is the smaller part of the overall pie, it is a critical one. Without that, the private sector investment is challenged. Now, as a financier of public sector investment in Vietnam, we are facing challenges at the moment. There are significant complexities associated with putting lending money in a sovereign way into the energy sector. We have had a project ready for several years. We still haven't had the nomination of the state agency that will be responsible for that project. And when I look at the ambitions of the GEP resource mobilization plans, of the government's own plans with the PDP-8, I see many decisions that need to be taken before the front door is opened and you can start on the journey of financing public investments. So I think if I want to give perhaps just one message out of this, it's let's develop the mechanism so that money can flow into the government. Otherwise it exists on paper and it doesn't translate practically into the kind of public investments that will crowd in the private sector.
Thank you, Caroline. Olivier, you are representing here the Global Financial Institution. Can you tell us how financial institutions are transforming themselves to accelerate towards the economy transition?
Thank you, Alain. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Caroline. I think that indeed the private sector is also important in the financing of this energy transition. I would say that global financial institutions have started to adapt themselves already a decade ago, and notably since the Paris Agreement in 2015, whereby global banks, but not only banks, we are here talking about investors as well, real money investors, asset managers, any type of investors and lenders, are basically defining their strategy around three pillars. The first pillar is to align with their own transition. Global banks are part of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, for instance, which sets a number of commitments towards this transition. They are members of the Equator Principles, which are also an important framework defining certain conditions for which banks should finance project financing. So indeed, this alignment with their own strategy is very important. The second pillar is, of course, to support their own clients and to support their own clients in their energy transition. There is not a single senior client meeting I have in Vietnam where I don't speak about ESG. This is absolutely critical, and it is very important that it is among the top priority of any financial institutions to talk about this topic with clients. The third one is, I would say, awareness, education. We need, of course, to train our staff. We need to have proper ESG data, IT processes, in order, of course, to measure those objectives. So these are very much the three pillars that any global financial institutions will go through. As far as Vietnam financial institutions are concerned, if you allow me to say a word on that, I think that I've seen quite a very positive momentum over the past 2 years. The most sophisticated local banks are more than aware of the situation. They have, for some of them, already set up a green and a finance framework with certain KPIs, with the objective of meeting certain objectives which goes in the right direction. So even though it's still complex, the measurement of their current CO2 emission is complex, we see a very good momentum into setting up a green and a green finance framework from the local banking community.
Thank you, Olivier. I think we have a third representative of the financial institution here. Ms. Sunita Luko actually is heading the European Investment Bank for Southeast Asia and the Pacific. She came specially for this event from Jakarta. Thank you, Sunita, for being here. Could you tell us why sustainable green energy is so important for the EIB?
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it is a pleasure to discuss about this important topic. Why? Because EIB, the raison d'être of the European Investment Bank is really to improve the lives in Europe and beyond. So as the EU Climate Bank, what we do is we support the initiative that is aligned with our environmental and climate goals. And as a non-profit making institution as well, we provide financing to all stakeholders, private sector, public sector, sub-sovereign, corporates, you name it, and also financial institution in order to provide financing. And we also, tailor-made our product in order to be, to appeal to the needs of the country. And of course, as EIB, the reason why we support, sustainable is that, we have seen it, is that renewable energy, sustainable energy is not a luxury, it is a commodity. It is to secure, energy security. We have seen recently the geopolitical conditions lately, what the impact has had on the prices and also on security. So I think it is important that we support this because also it helps the economic development, economic growth. So well, of course, how EIB plan to support, of course, there is a lot of challenges. I mean, it has its fair share of challenges, as Carolina was mentioning. But, it is, that's why we are in a transition. We are starting, or else would be down the line. So we know there's a long process. So how EIB is planning to do this is we tailor-make our financing to the needs of the country. We discuss with different local stakeholders, government agencies, NGOs, private sector, banks, in order to understand the needs and the challenges and to adapt to the needs of the country. And also, when I say tailor-made our loan, we are not, I like saying this, I mean, a World Bank will probably say the same thing. EIB is not an ATM. We are a financial impact institution. So when we give a loan, we will measure the impact. So we were talking about before, how do you measure? That is fundamental for us. We give loan, but we measure as well the impact on the country. So we would also provide technical knowledge. We support with grants, we support with cheaper loan already, and then we blend with grants that we can mobilize from the European Commission and other IFIs, and also other DFIs and EU member states funding. We blend, and then we have in-house expertise where we also advise. That is really important because, as you said, we transfer knowledge and also technology. So we hold handhold the process so that the project is being implemented properly. So there is a whole, I would say, arsenal of products and process at the back that we come and bring to the table. Also, for the private sector, for example, we can also give some risk mitigation. We can tap into the European Sustainable Fund, ESFD+, where we can provide guarantees and we can also provide, political risk in order to make it more appealing to private sector. And we do not end here. We are a long-term investment bank, so our loan is really the same length of an economic life of a project. So we do not just, step away when the loan or the project is done. We continue to follow and monitor so that we are still in a line. And finally, EIB, we do not want to be the single lender. We cooperate, we collaborate, not only because we want as well the rest of the sources to have the skin in the game, to have a bit more, to own the project. And also collaboration, we collaborate with MDBs to benefit of energies and also to pool the expertise. I'll end here. Thank you very much.
So practically, if I may ask a follow-up question, in a country like Vietnam at this stage, I believe you will be part of the GEF package. How you intend to intervene in Vietnam?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that important point.
Yeah.
As I said, EIB being the climate bank of the European Union, we are here to support this new initiative, new technology, new, I would say, new products. Just as you know, EIB has pledged for all of the 3 GEF countries. We have pledged 1 billion to South Africa, 1 billion to Indonesia, and 500 million to Vietnam. And we have last week, the Prime Minister, together with the EIB, has signed an MOU in order to be able to, deliver on that concretely. So I think there is this engagement by the government of, really moving towards a greener economy. Of course, as I said, as you know, we all know that there's a lot of possibility. Funding is not a problem. Bankable project is an issue, but that's how and why the multilateral development bank are here to accompany in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita. Let's have the view of the businesses now. Madam Maitan, you are chairwoman of RE Corporation. RE has been a local pioneer in renewable energy in Vietnam. What are you expecting from the government policy to support and develop your business?
So, thank you, Alan.
I think you could express yourself in Vietnamese, as you are the only Vietnamese in this panel, and we have simultaneous translation. So if you feel
Okay, thank
better,
you.
do it in Vietnamese.
I do Vietnamese. Okay. Government to business and business to government, vai trò và trách nhiệm trong vấn đề hỗ trợ để chuyển đổi xanh. Nhưng mà vai trò và trách nhiệm của mỗi bên rất là khác nhau. Hôm nay chúng ta được nghe rất là nhiều bài phát biểu, đặc biệt là những bài phát biểu của các vị bộ trưởng kế hoạch đầu tư, công thương và nông nghiệp, nông thôn. Nhưng mà tôi rất tiếc trong cái buổi đối thoại cái chủ đề này thì một số quan chức đã rời khán phòng. Chúng tôi rất là cảm kích khi mà ông chủ tịch của thành phố chúng tôi, chủ tịch thành phố Hồ Chí Minh vẫn còn đang ngồi ở đây, và chúng tôi sẽ nói và chắc là ông sẽ lắng nghe. Chúng ta biết rằng từ tháng 11 năm 20 và tháng 1 năm 21 thì hiệu lực của giá điện cho điện gió cũng như điện mặt trời đã hết hiệu lực. Như vậy là đã gần tròn 3 năm. Trong 3 năm đó thì tất cả chúng ta, đúng là tất cả những người mà làm phát triển nguồn điện này thì đứng ngồi không yên. Vì chúng ta biết rằng là làm kinh doanh nó giống như chúng ta đi trên một chiếc xe đạp như vậy. Nếu chúng ta ngừng đạp, chiếc xe sẽ lật đổ. Cho nên là rất là nóng lòng chờ cái gì? Chờ chính phủ có những quyết sách cho cái vấn đề đại sự quốc gia, đó là Green Economy và Green Transition, tiến tới Net Zero CO2 vào năm 2050. Và cái khung chính sách đó là gì? Nó rất cấp bách là phải ban hành. Không phải là cơ chế xin cho nữa, là gì? Cách thức giao nhận dự án như thế nào? Và giá điện ra sao? Khả năng tiêu hết sản lượng mà chúng ta có thể sản xuất ra và sự đảm bảo truyền tải. Đây có thể nói là 3 cái nội dung chính mà chắc có lẽ là các vị ngân hàng đều rất quan tâm trong cái hợp đồng mua bán điện PPA. Thì chúng tôi thấy rằng về cơ chế khả năng mua hết điện đó, nếu mà điện sản xuất ra không mua hết thì sẽ là rất lãng phí về đầu tư, bất kể đó là từ nhà nước hay là từ tư nhân. Cho nên là mua hết sẽ làm cho giá thành nó rẻ đi và trở nên cạnh tranh và hợp lý cho nền kinh tế. Cái vấn đề thứ hai thì chúng ta thấy rằng về cái vấn đề truyền tải, thì rõ ràng là nếu chúng ta nói chuyển đổi kinh tế xanh thì một cái tỷ lệ rất lớn về năng lượng tái tạo sẽ bao gồm trong tất cả nguồn điện của chúng ta, một tỷ lệ rất lớn. Do vậy không thể nói rằng phải giới hạn cái này nữa, mà chúng ta phải đối mặt với vấn đề đó. Như vậy cái hệ thống truyền tải của chúng ta phải là một hệ thống mà sáng nay các nhà mà làm thiết bị điện đã nói đến một hệ thống smart, thông minh. Thông minh là sao? Hiện tại hệ thống của chúng ta có thể là dự đoán trước đây 60 phút, bây giờ dự đoán 60 phút về thời tiết, có gió hay không, có mưa, có nước hay không, để có thể điều tiết hệ thống điện sát với cái nhu cầu về tiêu dùng, về sử dụng. Thì bây giờ nếu mà hệ thống này thông minh thì có thể tiến tới 10 phút, 20 phút là cái đó hoàn toàn có thể. Cho nên cái lý do để mà không cho tiếp tục làm năng lượng mặt trời thì nó hoàn toàn không có lý trong cái điều kiện mới. Mà tôi nghĩ ngành điện sẽ đối mặt cái vấn đề là nâng cấp và đầu tư cho hệ thống truyền tải điện. Thì đó là một cái ý tôi nghĩ rất là quan trọng, mà tôi nghĩ đó là 3 cái điều kiện có thể là tiên quyết. Tôi không biết các vị ngân hàng có đồng ý hay không trong cái hợp đồng mà mua bán điện. Kế đến là vấn đề giá điện. Giá điện là vô cùng quan trọng. Giá điện thì chúng tôi thấy chính phủ nói là phải có giá điện thấp để phù hợp với cái nền kinh tế. Nhưng mà với cái giá điện vừa rồi mà trong quá trình chuyển tiếp á, thì chúng ta thấy là nhà đầu tư cảm thấy là không còn hấp dẫn để đầu tư. Và chúng ta thấy cũng có thể đối mặt với rủi ro. Giá điện fix trước đây thì thu hút được cái dòng đầu tư từ tư nhân rất là mạnh. Nhưng mà sau khi một số dự án bị miss COD thì giá điện giảm xuống 20-25%. Và cái giá này chúng tôi cho rằng là một cái giá mà khó lòng thu hút nhà đầu tư. Nhưng cái giá điện nào mà phù hợp với nền kinh tế, nó sẽ bao hàm với cái việc mà mua hết sản lượng cũng như là cái khả năng truyền tải hết nó. Đó là những cái vấn đề mà không thể tách rời, mà tôi nghĩ là khối doanh nghiệp, cộng đồng doanh nghiệp cũng như là chính phủ cần phải hợp tác chặt chẽ trong vấn đề này để tìm ra một cái giá điện mà thu hút được nhà đầu tư, cũng như là có thể là bankable, tức là một cái hồ sơ mà ngân hàng có thể tài trợ cho cái dự án của chúng ta. Thì tôi nghĩ đó là một vấn đề mà tôi nghĩ là về phía chính phủ cần phải gấp rút ban hành. Hiện tại chúng ta thấy từ đây cho đến 2030 thì chỉ 6 gigawatt offshore, mà Việt Nam thì chưa có kinh nghiệm về làm offshore. Thì một câu hỏi đặt ra, tại sao chúng ta không thể cho làm 1-2 cái pilot bắt đầu ngay để chính phủ và cộng đồng doanh nghiệp cũng đồng hành trên một cái dự án như vậy. Từ cái thực tế đó thì chính phủ có thể xây dựng một cái khung chính sách nó hoàn chỉnh hơn từ một thực tế này. Thì tôi nghĩ là hãy cho một dự án ở miền Nam, một dự án ở miền Trung hay là miền Bắc làm pilot. Và tôi nghĩ là tôi biết rằng có một số nhà đầu tư đã đệ trình cái này lên, nhưng mà chính phủ có lẽ lúc này còn đang rất là bận rộn, chưa có để ý. Thì chúng tôi mong rằng là cộng đồng châu Âu, Eurocharm và sẽ cùng với cộng đồng doanh nghiệp trong nước, chúng ta sẽ cùng nói chuyện với chính phủ về vấn đề này. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you, Maitan, for your very pragmatic and realistic remarks, as usual. I'm sure our next speaker, Stuart, will talk about offshore wind. But Stuart, as Maitan just reminded us, and the whole audience will recall, Prime Minister Chin has really set a very ambitious target for Vietnam to become net zero by 2050. In addition, many investors in Vietnam, either foreigners and some local already, are set up some even more ambitious target to be net zero much before 2050. This will require increased green energy to be established, to be able to expand their operation and even to maintain their operation and to meet their net zero commitment. How are the perceived opportunities and risk for Vietnam, considering foreign capital demands for green power?
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I appreciate it much. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's been touched upon by many members of the panel now that private investment will not occur, will not materialize until we get to a stage where if private investment does not materialize, we will have a situation whereby we do not deliver sufficient green energy into the system. And I think that's it's a domino effect. It's very easy to understand that. As you touched upon, one of the key aspects here that Vietnam needs to be aware of, and I'm sure many people are, is that there is a huge opportunity for Vietnam right now, but there is a major risk that comes with it. Many of the companies that are already operating in Vietnam, and several of those are members of Eurocham, do have their own green commitments, net zero commitments, some of which are extremely ambitious, much more than 2050 net zero. What will be the case inevitably is if Vietnam cannot supply sufficient green energy to these companies, which can be actually major financial contributors as part of Vietnam's GDP, these companies are going to be forced to look elsewhere or forced to push forward some form of direct power purchase agreement to make sure they can maintain operation in Vietnam. Now, if Vietnam is unable to provide that green energy, then they will have little or no choice but to look at other markets to move, and that will be a very big risk for Vietnam to lose a lot of GDP increase here. It should also be recognized as the world is increasing and more investors are looking to move into Vietnam, most of these investors will actually have a green power requirement either themselves or the supply chain that will deliver for them will need to deliver some sort of green power requirement. There needs to be a vision from Vietnam to state that how are we going to attract this future investment? We need to make sure that renewable power is available, can be traced and can be available to these providers as it comes forward. I think it's very easy for many of us to realize that it's becoming very difficult for many people nowadays to actually raise finance for fossil fuel based generation. And that is a big risk for Vietnam in terms of if it decides to continue its journey with fossil fuel generation. But it's also an opportunity. And I'll go into the opportunities now because A lot of the opportunities that come from Vietnam is in relation to renewable energy and the huge advantages that Vietnam has in terms of the amount of renewable energy available to it. Solar and wind are key aspects associated with this. It's important for Vietnam really to recognize firstly what it's achieved. This is not a doom and gloom story. I mean, Vietnam has got an extremely high amount of renewable energy already in its power generation mix. That in itself is causing some problems in terms of what the grid is actually able to deal with and move around the country. But it has actually managed to succeed in delivering that renewable energy, and it's important not to forget that milestone. But it also, at the same stage, needs to recognize the potential to increase from this. Vietnam is a very unique place right now, within Southeast Asia particularly, in terms of the landscape and the ability to deploy renewable energy on a very large scale, to look for its own needs, to supply renewable energy to its own market and the suppliers within it, but also to export, as also has been approached by the Prime Minister. Further investment will come with newer technologies. In addition to those that have already proven, offshore wind will be one of these big newer technologies. It's proven, but it's not yet used yet in Vietnam, but has a huge potential to deliver for the renewable energy growth in Vietnam and to export. There's also new technologies that are around the corner that are starting to be introduced elsewhere. Storage, power-to-X aspects with either battery storage or green hydrogen production or ammonia production. Those are around the corner. I think, though, the first steps need to be delivered at expanding the onshore wind, onshore solar industry, introducing the new offshore wind industry, which will definitely have benefits in the long run, have a stable foundation for this, and then start to encourage the newer power-to-X elements going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Olivier, with your view as a large corporate banker in this country, how do you assess the Vietnam's corporate sector standing in the sustainable journey?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's not an easy one because, of course, the issue is massively complex. But as far as the private corporate sector is concerned, first we have to make a distinction between the large companies, or the large mid-cap at least, and the SMEs and small businesses. Of course, the situation is totally different. Looking at the large companies, the large private listed companies, they have already started their transformation, their journey. They don't wait for regulators to set up rules and to comply with the rule, because they are pushed by investors, they are pushed by their shareholders, they are pushed by their employees, and they are forced to change. So this is much easier, I would say, for the very large companies. There is a 6-step approach that every single large company will go through. The first one is awareness. I think we are there. And I think over the past 2 years, indeed, we have seen a very good momentum. The second one is disclosure. Large companies have absolutely to measure their greenhouse gas emission in order to use it as a baseline and to set KPIs and a trajectory to reduce those emissions. If you don't know how much you consume, you cannot know how much you can or you want to reduce. So if you do not measure your Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions, it's going to be very challenging. And I think that large companies should be in a position to start measuring at least Scope 1 and Scope 2, which are Scope 1 direct emissions, Scope 2 indirect emissions. Scope 3 is a little bit more challenging because it concerns the emissions from your supply chain, clients and suppliers, but it is something that the best in class in Europe and in the US are measuring already for quite some time. So I think that it will come also in Vietnam. Of course, then it's disclosure, it's reporting, and then the 5 and the 6 steps are rating, ESG rating. Large companies will get their Sustainalytics or Moody's or whatever rating, and then, of course, solutions. And solutions will go through voluntary carbon market reduction or any other type of solution. So there is a 6-step approach which is quite clear. It's a complicated, it's a long journey, it's a roadmap that every large companies will have to go through. For SMEs and small businesses, obviously, the level of understanding of the issue, the cost of this transformation is an issue. And of course, they need to be supported by banks, both private and public banks. And I guess that the regulators play also a very important role on that. And I will think that large companies will play an important role, because when you measure your Scope 3 emission, you also engage with your suppliers and your clients, many of which are SMEs and small businesses, and you also indirectly facilitate the change of those businesses. So this is the journey that everyone will have to go through. It's probably a decade-long journey, and the earlier you start, the better it is. The less painful it will be anyway. And there's only one direction anyway. So.
Yeah, I agree. The earlier we start, the better it is. Maitan, we have talked a lot about energy production, but I know your company is contemplating some other routes, especially on the efficiency of energy, like waste to energy or some other example. I really believe Vietnam could do a lot in that direction, which is not actually very included yet in the PDP8 or in the policy, but could be practically implemented very quickly. Could you give us some example of this?
Yes, we are actively proposed to the local government, also to the central government, some project. For Ho Chi Minh City, we propose one project called Waste to Energy. And we propose in form of pre-feasibility study to the city, and we are still waiting for the approval for the first stage, and we can start immediately. And some banker already promised to support for this project. So I think our chairman of city very support for this project, and we hope he can pushing more to be quickly. Okay. The second one, we propose also to the government that we have a few reservoir of our hydropower plant where we can put solar, floating solar on that to manage daily together with the water of the reservoir to manage the system, to in contribution to the management of the system by day and night, even for peak hour. Peak hour in Ho Chi Minh City need very high capacity, double as standard capacity. So, and also we are providing on also mechanical electron service. So we provide a system where meet the standard like lead platinum, lead con like Deutsches House in Ho Chi Minh City, and our commercial building also with the standard. Some projects also meet the German standard DGNB of Germany to general saving energy. So that is a lot of work we can do right now. We're just waiting for the signal from government side. Please.
Thank you, Maitan. I am asked to speed up, but we still have quite a few interesting topics to address. Stuart, could you tell us what is one of the biggest threats for expanding renewable energy role at the country level at this time today?
Sure, Alan, thanks for the question. Let me go quickly through it. I'll just go some bullet points from my side. So I think 4 threats as I see them. Currently, there's a complete lack of clarity, really, to the investment environment, particularly for new renewables. With no clarity, there's no incentive to start thinking about how you can deploy your investment. With little or no clarity, we're not going to move forward. So that's a simple thing. The clarity is linked to the need for a clear and transparent and suitable regulatory framework, and I think that's pretty much where we're stuck at the moment. And many of that is down to the fact that we have some real problems with regards to decision-making by key personnel, and also decision-making in terms of linking ministries together. The isolated aspect of how ministries are working is not supporting the renewable energy growth path that we have in Vietnam. And if there was one main recommendation I could take forward from today, it was to get some alignment in a ministerial level, and if that requires top-down decision-making, then so be it. I think that's the place to go. The other threat I think that I'd just like to highlight now is it's related to competition, really. Vietnam has some fantastic targets, but it should not remember that it's alone here. The rest of the world has really high renewable energy targets and really high net zero targets as well. And when it comes to renewable energy, one of the main components we have is supply chain right now. And I'm sure many people have seen this both for wind and for solar. Supply chain is becoming the bottleneck. There is not enough supply of turbines, solar panels, vessels to get all this infrastructure in place. Now, the longer that Vietnam takes to actually make decisions and try and put decisions in place to trigger renewable energy, the tighter it's going to get to its goals. And when it seeks to go out to try and absorb the supply chain simply will not be there. If you look at offshore wind now, you cannot buy turbines for offshore wind in 26, 27. They're just not available. The supply chain is backed up. You will not be able to buy offshore wind turbines until 27, 28. And that's a simple fact. They cannot provide them right now. So there is a huge threat to Vietnam at this stage. But I would like to say that there is also opportunities going forward. One of the key things that I always like to say is I truly believe that Vietnam has a huge potential to be a renewable energy hub for Southeast Asia. And I'm not doing that to say, look, support me, I'm a big Vietnamese fan. Vietnam is extremely well positioned, not just because of the amount of renewable energy it can generate itself, but it has a fantastic supply chain, it has a really good labor force, and it is very well positioned logistically and centrally to actually support the rest of Southeast Asia. And I really do believe that there is many different aspects that Vietnam can deliver here. And if it actually starts to push things forward, make decisions, it can actually potentially even exceed on sort of its goals in the long term. Which will, of course, increase foreign investment and increase GDP, gross domestic products in country. My one takeaway point here, and I think I've sort of said it vaguely, but just to deliver the point home, is we are in a window of opportunity now for Vietnam. And this window of opportunity is actually starting to close. Not for the long term, but for the short-term goals for 2030 in particular. And if Vietnam cannot make some decisions right now and cannot get these regulations through, this window of opportunity will move on. And nobody will be talking about 2030 anymore because that bus will have passed and the next bus will come into the station. So one message, seize the day, window of opportunity now.
Thank you, Stuart. Before we close, I think we have highlighted a few times already this morning and this afternoon on the importance of the agricultural sector in Vietnam. And this sector is, in one hand, extremely affected by the climate change, and on the other hand, is also one of the major carbon emitter. Caroline, I know the World Bank has done a lot of work on this as well, and you have some ideas for Vietnam. Could you, I'm sorry that the Minister of Agriculture has to leave us before this, but I know there are a few people in the room who will report to him. Could you let us know what are your solutions?
So actually, the Minister of Agriculture knows very well our thoughts on this. So, no, you're absolutely right. Although, obviously, at the heart of the pathway to net zero is the energy sector, there's plenty of other sectors that are contributing to emissions growth in Vietnam at the moment, and agriculture is one of those. And both the Minister of Agriculture and the Prime Minister were talking about rice and the Mekong Delta. What we've been doing is we've had quite a substantial pilot program going in the Mekong Delta, which pilots new technologies of growing rice. So it takes out all of the flooding of rice, and it uses much less water throughout the production process. It uses less pesticides. It uses particular seeds and so on. And what we found through this is that this new technology works. It works in several ways. First of all, it does reduce emissions really quite significantly. So we did this with about 180,000 households, about 1 million people in total, and the emissions reduced were about 1.5 million tons per year. Net profits for the farmers went up 30%. Seed costs went down by 35%. Inorganic fertilizer use went down 35%. Pesticide use went down 45%. Water pumping went down 30%, and total production costs went down 11%. So there is a business model there. Now, what the Minister of Agriculture would like to do is scale this up from what we've done is a few 100,000 hectares to 1 million hectares. And that is a different kind of challenge, of course, and it's a financing challenge as much as anything else. It's a challenge in terms of bringing the rice traders together with the farmers. It's a challenge in terms of ensuring that low methane rice commands a premium and therefore that can be passed on to farmers. It's a challenge in terms of financing the infrastructure. That is easier for an organization like the World Bank to provide, but it also will need a lot of training of farmers and so on, which typically the government looks to grant financing for. What we're saying to the government of Vietnam at the moment is that they need to look towards carbon markets to provide revenue streams that can then be cycled back to farmer incomes and support them. And so that sort of business model is both one of increasing incomes for farmers while reducing the methane. So that's what we're looking at the moment. The government has a plan which they're about to approve called the 1 million hectare program. We plan to be supporters of that as far as we can, but we will be looking to to hook the Ministry of Agriculture into the voluntary carbon market so that they can get that supplementary income into the whole process.
Thank you. So to conclude this panel, I would just ask maybe each of you to give me one word or one small sentence. What's your recommendation to the government of Vietnam to accelerate and succeed in the green transition? Maybe Mai Tan, if you don't mind to start.
Liberal. Not xin cho, but mechanic. Cơ chế tự chủ.
Two words or two ideas, if I may. One to the government, project bankability. No bankability, no private financing, unfortunately. I think it is very, very important to understand that. And project bankability means a lot of things which have to be fixed, one of which is, of course, the curtailment issue, which is a major issue. If you don't have the certainty that the off-taker is going to purchase the electricity produced by the project, it's very difficult for a lender to build a financial model based on the future cash flow of the project. So bankability, and of which curtailment. That's one thing. Second, for the private sector, not the government, measure your scope 1, scope 2, and if possible, scope 3. Thank you.
Good. Sunita.
Okay, as a banker, so what I would say is incentivize, prioritize, and invest in renewable energy. Because it is not only reducing, carbon emissions, but it is also helping economic growth and also energy security. And I think also it will allow the affordability to everyone, energy for everyone with accessibility and affordability. And we as a bank, as a multilateral, I'm looking to to Caroline, we do not leave anyone behind. So we have to do this to ensure that it is available to everyone. But again, if I may, on a second one, I'm sure you were saying the message is also to the government, if I may add, it is not only the government that is need to play a role. It is a collective effort. Every single one has their role to play. Government, policymakers, NGOs, partnership, universities, because you need to prepare this, the workforce, the skill and competence, and also, the people around. So I think that is also the message. It is the right, it is of everyone to be part of that game. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mine's very brief. Set the regulations in place so that you can, so that large-scale financing can flow into EVN and its subsidiaries to make the public investment in transmission that Madam Mai Tang was talking about, so that the private sector will come.
Thank you, Carrie. Stuart, you have the last word.
I'm just going to repeat what I said last time because I think it's so important. Just recognize the window of opportunity. We need to trigger some top-down decisions. We need to get some alignment, and we need to make sure this can materialize. Window of opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all the panelists.